What if I told you that one of America's most iconic luxury brands almost died because it refused to sell to Black customers? Yeah, this is the story of how Cadillac nearly vanished during the Great Depression and how the very people it excluded helped keep it alive. When most people picture Cadillac, they see chrome, white walls, and old-school American prestige. The brand launched in 1903 and somehow survived when dozens of early automakers didn't. That same year alone, 57 car companies were born, 27 went bankrupt. Cadillac endured. But fast forward to the early 1930s, and it was on life support. The Great Depression didn't just hurt car sales, it crushed them. In 1928, General Motors built 1,709,763 vehicles. Of those, 41,172 were Cadillacs. By 1933, GM production had fallen to 779,029 vehicles total, and Cadillac just 6,736 units. That's an 84% collapse. Luxury had become a liability. Executives were seriously considering pulling the plug. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. At the time, Cadillac had a de facto policy. Dealerships were not supposed to sell cars to Black customers. It wasn't always written down, but it was enforced. The fear? That Black ownership would damage the brand's prestige among white buyers. Yes, that was the logic. And yet, something strange was happening. A German-born service manager named Nicholas Dreistadt noticed it first. Dreistadt had come to America at 22 with experience at Mercedes-Benz. By the early 1930s, he was in charge of Cadillac's nationwide service network. He wasn't an executive, he wasn't invited to big strategy meetings, but he was paying attention. While visiting dealerships across the country, Dreistadt kept seeing something that didn't add up. A noticeable number of Cadillacs being serviced belonged to affluent Black customers, boxers, entertainers, lawyers, doctors, ministers. Wait, how? If Cadillac wasn't selling to them, how were they driving them? The answer? They were paying white men $300 to act as frontmen and buy the cars on their behalf. $300 during the Great Depression just to get around a racist sales policy. That's not just demand, that's determination. So, in 1932, Dreistadt did something bold. He crashed a GM executive committee meeting and asked for 10 minutes. Imagine the room, suits, cigars, a dying luxury brand on the agenda. And this service manager walks in and says, "I can make Cadillac profitable in 18 months. His pitch was simple and ruthless in its logic. If Black customers are already willing to pay extra just to own a Cadillac, why are we letting middlemen pocket that money instead of General Motors? In other words, green is green." The executives listened. They gave him the shot. The discriminatory sales policy was lifted. By 1934, Cadillac sales had increased roughly 70% and the division had broken even. It didn't even take the full 18 months. Dreistadt turned things around in 12. On June 10, 1934, he was made head of the Cadillac division. Now, let's slow down because this is where the legend and the nuance meet. Did Black buyers single-handedly save Cadillac? Not exactly. Cadillac's rebound happened during a broader industry recovery between 1933 and 1937. Dreistadt also slashed production costs. Within 3 years, per-unit production costs matched those of Chevrolet. The lineup was restructured. Lower-priced Series 61, 62, and 63 models replaced LaSalle in 1941, with list prices from $1,345 to $1,965. Traditional Cadillacs above $2,000 made up less than 11% of total output. Translation: Cadillac also moved down market to survive. Production of Cadillac and LaSalle climbed from under 6,700 units in 1933 to over 66,000 in 1941, almost a tenfold increase. So no, this wasn't a single-factor miracle. But here's what is undeniable. Affluent Black Americans were buying Cadillacs despite systemic discrimination. They paid cash when loans weren't available. They pooled resources through churches and fraternal networks. For many, a Cadillac wasn't just transportation, it was visibility, status, a public declaration of success in a country actively trying to deny it. As historian Gretchen Soren later noted, large cars like Cadillacs and Buicks also served a practical purpose. Because Black travelers often couldn't rely on restaurants or hotels, their cars needed to be big enough to sleep in and carry food. That's not luxury, that's resilience. Interestingly, there's little evidence Cadillac actively marketed to Black consumers afterwards. The sales ban ended, but targeted outreach didn't. Drystadt's move was a step towards justice, but it was also business math. Still, it mattered. Because without that policy change, without that 10-minute interruption in a boardroom, Cadillac might have gone the way of Packard, Studebaker Motor Car Company. Instead, Cadillac became America's status symbol. Nicholas Drystadt went on to lead Cadillac until after World War II, then headed Chevrolet. He died of cancer in 1948 at just 59. So what's the takeaway? This isn't a fairy tale about corporate kindness. It's a story about economics forcing morality to catch up. Cadillac survived because it finally recognized a customer it had ignored. And here we are, over a century later, still talking about the crest and wreath. So next time you see a classic Cadillac glide by, remember it carries more than chrome and horsepower. It carries a lesson. And if you enjoy stories where horsepower meets history, where the receipts are just as loud as the exhaust, go ahead and hit that like button like you're closing the door on a 30s Cadillac. Solid, confident, no rattles. And subscribe, because we've got a lot more automotive skeletons in the garage.